Roger Ross is the author of Kinda Christian, From Curious to Serious About Jesus Christ. He also leads a coaching and mentoring group for ministers called the Humility Group. You will be inspired as you listen to his story today on the Evangelism Podcast.
Jesus said, "Go into all the world and preach the gospel.
Everyone who calls on the name of the Lord shall be saved."
Welcome to the Evangelism Podcast with Dr. Daniel King, where Daniel interviews full-time evangelists, pastors, missionaries, and normal everyday Christians to discover how they share their faith, their powerful testimonies, and amazing stories that will inspire you to reach people with the good news. And now, here's your host, missionary and evangelist, Daniel King.
Welcome to the Evangelism Podcast. I'm Daniel King. I'm excited about telling people about Jesus. Today we have a very special guest with us, Roger Ross, who wrote a book called Kinda Christian, From Curious to Serious About Jesus. Brother Roger, thank you for joining me on the Evangelism Podcast today.
Thanks for having me, Daniel.
Hey, I love the title of your book. Tell me a little bit about what it means.
Yeah, I've had a lot of people ask me about that. I've discovered there are a lot of folks in our world that are really good people that have perhaps some kind of connection with the church, but they just don't have a connection with Jesus. In our culture, in Western culture, certainly in the United States, you can be a good Christian and go to church 1.2 times a month. You can be considered faithful and really not be showing up much or participating much. So you're kind of Christian. There's also lots of folks that have some kind of background. Maybe their family was Christian, but it never really clicked for them. They've never had a life-altering relationship with Jesus. So this is a book for those people primarily, people that are looking for something more. They're curious spiritually, and they don't know exactly where to turn.
Do you see a growth in the number of people who are curious about Jesus right now?
I do, actually, especially in Gen Z. Gen Z is changing the ball game in Western culture, certainly in the United States. They are coming on strong in ways that no one could have predicted even a couple of years ago. And there is a tremendous amount of spiritual curiosity in the younger generations, especially.
How do you think the church should interact with those who are spiritually curious? Maybe their parents or grandparents were Christian, but they don't have much of a relationship with God, but they're interested in learning more.
Yeah, I found that folks that are in that situation really love to have honest, safe conversations about spiritual things. They've got all kinds of questions about spiritual stuff. They just don't know where to turn. They feel a little sheepish about talking to their friends about it because their friends aren't necessarily Christian or spiritual, at least they don't think. And so they've got these questions that they just swallow, and wrestle with in the dark of the night, and really don't know how to express them or find some kind of path to work their spirituality out. And if someone will just say, "Hey, tell me about what's really going on inside. What are your deeper desires? I know you want to be a success. I know you want to make a lot of money. I know you have big plans for your life, but what do you want really underneath that?" And pretty much everybody's the same. They want to be loved for who they are. They want to know that they matter. They want to know that they have a purpose in this world. And those are spiritual issues. And if people will give them an opportunity to talk about those things, you can really go to town.
Now, in your book, you mention 6 marks that define a deeply devoted disciple. What are some of those things that show that someone is deeply devoted, and how do these different pathways encourage spiritual growth?
Yeah, that's a great question. In the last church that I was serving, we kept having people that would show up, newcomers that would show up. And our mission statement was to make disciples of Jesus Christ for the transformation of the world. And we kept having these newcomers say, hey, I love that whole transformation of the world thing, but what's a disciple? And we're like, well, everybody knows what a disciple is, right? It's a little of this, it's a little of that. Well, we know them when we see one. And that wasn't very satisfying. And it was embarrassing for us because we didn't really have a good answer ourselves. We just assumed everybody knew. So I talked to the other pastors. I said, look, we got to come up with a better answer. This is embarrassing. So I said, how hard could this be? Let's just get our heads together and let's knock something out in 3 weeks. 8 months later, we actually had something that we could bring to our leadership team to say, hey, we think this is what it looks like to be a disciple. We had to just wrestle it out of our guts. What does it really mean? Search the scriptures, do everything we could to figure out what it would be a faithful path to actually make a disciple. And what we came up with were these 6 G's. They were the 6 marks that we called of a deeply devoted disciple. And they were glory, grace, group, growth, giftedness, and generosity. And each of those G's has both an inward experience to them as well as an outward expression. So let's talk about glory to begin with. With regard to glory, when you come into some kind of encounter of an encounter of God's presence, you're going to enter into God's glory. And you can enter in God's glory whether you're in a public worship service with lots of people around, or you can do that in a one-on-one relationship. When you enter into the chapel of your own heart in solitude, or when you are in an ongoing relationship, an ongoing conversation with God through the day, practicing the presence of God. Brother Lawrence talked about this 300 years ago. And it's been actually, that little book is probably the most often read book outside of the Bible in the last 300 years in Western society. And then there's also a process of daily review. It's kind of where you watch the game tape from your day before and say, okay, where was God showing up in my life over the course of this past 24 hours? Where did I feel like God was drawing close? And and that was a sense of consolation for me. And where did I feel desolation? Where did it feel like God was far away, or I had drawn far away from God over the course of the last 24 hours? And just reviewing your day has a way of helping you to understand the way that God is working in your life and when you're presently aware of God's presence. That's just a way to experience the glory of God. And then when we experience the glory of God, of course, we can share that with others. Same is true with grace, right? When you experience grace, when you receive grace, the natural outflow is then to relay it to other people. And that's the kind of progress that you take as you go through each of the G's.
Let's go back to your story. How did you become a serious follower of Jesus Christ? And then what has been your walk in helping to lead other people to being serious about their relationship with God?
Yeah, well, I first came to know Jesus when I was 14 years old and praying in the dark of the night in my bedroom, the prayer that my Sunday school teacher, Sharon Russ, asked me to pray or invited us to pray as a group. And that was, Jesus, come into my heart. And I just prayed that over and over again until at one point Jesus did in such a powerful and transforming way that it's hard for me to even put into words. It was kind of the classic bright light, and 10,000 pounds were released from my heart, and I just felt free and full. And for the first time in my life, I knew that God was not a concept. God was not a principle or a precept. God was a person. And I could have a real relationship with God. That was the beginning. And then later on in college, I got into a group of other college students that really formed kind of a deputation team where we go out and do musical worship services and give our testimonies in the process. And it was in that group and in the experience of giving testimonies and leading worship and the like, I realized this whole idea of becoming a marine biologist, which was my original dream from my life, was getting rerouted by God into a completely different direction, and I felt strongly called into the ministry, and so that's when I started going deeper into my own level of discipleship. And wanting to help other people. As a pastor, I just wanted to help other people not just find Jesus, but know how to follow him in the deepest way they could.
Yeah, I really like how your book is organized. The first section is really about becoming a deeply devoted disciple. And then your second section is about how to become a disciple who makes other disciples. So let's talk about that second part. How do you become a disciple who then creates other disciples?
Yeah, that's the part where I talk about jumping in the river, and so I use the word river as an acronym for that, and really talk about how once